The officer thought he was questioning a stranger. He had no idea he was standing in front of a man whose name was already known by people far beyond that room. The morning began like any other in a busy government building in Washington, D.C. People moved through the entrance with their daily routines, carrying briefcases, documents, and coffee while preparing for another day of responsibilities. Among the crowd was Marcus Carter, a quiet man in his mid-50s wearing a simple jacket and holding a small folder close to him. Nothing about his appearance demanded attention. He was not surrounded by cameras, assistants, or anything that suggested importance. To anyone passing by, Marcus looked like an ordinary visitor. But the truth was that his life carried a story most people could never see. Marcus had spent decades serving his country as a member of the United States military. After retiring, he chose a peaceful life away from the spotlight. He did not spend his days telling people about his accomplishments or reminding others of the sacrifices he had made. For Marcus, service was never about receiving praise. It was about responsibility, commitment, and keeping the promises he had made long ago. The lessons he learned during his years in uniform remained with him every day. Discipline, patience, respect. Those values shaped the way he spoke, the way he listened, and the way he handled difficult moments. Officer Michael Reynolds was working nearby, responsible for maintaining order and making sure procedures were followed. Like many people in positions of authority, Michael believed that careful observation and quick decisions were important parts of his job. He trusted his experience and believed that paying attention to details could prevent problems before they happened. When he noticed Marcus, he believed he understood the situation in front of him. But sometimes the most important details are the ones that cannot be seen immediately. A person can carry decades of achievements without displaying a single sign of them. A person can walk through a room carrying memories, sacrifices, and accomplishments that remain invisible to everyone around them. Marcus understood that better than most. Throughout his life, he had learned that true character was revealed during moments when nobody was watching and nobody was offering recognition. He never needed strangers to know his history in order to know his own worth. Imagine standing in front of someone who sees only a few seconds of your life while you carry an entire lifetime of experiences they know nothing about. Imagine having every reason to explain yourself but choosing patience because you believe the truth does not need to be forced. That was the kind of quiet confidence Marcus carried. As the morning continued, a simple interaction began to unfold into something much larger. Michael believed he was looking at a situation that could be understood quickly, but he did not yet know the story behind the man standing in front of him. He did not know the years of service, the dedication, or the reason Marcus's name would soon become important to people far beyond the walls of that building. At that moment, everyone saw only a quiet veteran. Nobody yet understood that they were about to discover a story of honor, identity, and a truth that had been waiting years to be recognized. The room remained calm, but the meaning behind the moment was beginning to change. Marcus Carter stood quietly, answering questions with the same patience he had shown from the beginning. He did not act like someone trying to hide something. He did not behave like someone looking for special treatment. Instead, he carried himself with the same discipline that had guided him through decades of service. Officer Michael Reynolds continued trying to understand the situation in front of him. From his perspective, he was simply doing his responsibility. He believed that asking questions and confirming information were necessary parts of his role. But what Michael did not yet understand was that the person standing in front of him had spent a lifetime being prepared for moments exactly like this. Marcus had learned during his military career that patience could reveal more than quick reactions. In the service, decisions were not made based only on what appeared obvious at first glance. People had to look deeper, consider the full picture, and understand circumstances before reaching conclusions. Those lessons stayed with him long after he left the military. Now, they guided him through this unexpected situation. Marcus noticed the uncertainty around him, but he did not allow it to change his character. He knew who he was. He knew what he had accomplished. He also knew that his worth did not depend on whether someone recognized it immediately. That understanding gave him a quiet confidence that could not be easily shaken. Michael, however, only had a small part of the story. He saw a man with documents and questions surrounding his identity, but he did not see the years behind that moment. He did not see the early mornings, the responsibilities, the sacrifices, or the commitment that shaped Marcus into the person he had become. Sometimes the biggest misunderstandings happen when people believe they have enough information, when in reality they only have one small piece of a much larger picture. Imagine carrying a lifetime of service while standing in a place where nobody knows your history. Imagine hearing doubts about your story while knowing that the truth exists in records, memories, and the people who witnessed your journey. Many people would feel the need to explain everything immediately. Many would want to list every achievement and every reason they deserved respect. But Marcus chose a different path. He believed dignity did not come from forcing people to understand. It came from remaining true to yourself while the truth had time to appear. As the situation continued, small details began to stand out. The calm way Marcus responded, the respect in his voice, the confidence of someone who was not afraid of questions because he knew his own story. Those details created a different impression among the people nearby. They began wondering if they had misunderstood the person in front of them. Michael also started noticing that there was something different about Marcus. This was not someone trying to create confusion. This was someone who seemed completely comfortable with the truth of his own life. What nobody realized yet was that the answers they were looking for were connected to a history much larger than that single moment. The name Marcus Carter was about to become more than just a name on a document. It was about to reveal a legacy that had remained hidden in plain sight. The more time passed, the clearer it became that Marcus Carter was not the person people first assumed he was. The quiet confidence he carried was beginning to raise questions, not because he was trying to draw attention, but because his actions revealed a level of discipline that seemed different from an ordinary visitor. He remained patient through every moment, never rushing to defend himself or demanding that others immediately understand. That patience came from a lifetime of experience. Marcus had learned that the truth did not need to compete for attention. It simply needed the right moment to be discovered. Officer Michael Reynolds continued reviewing the information available to him. He had approached the situation believing he was following the responsibilities of his position. He valued preparation, awareness, and making sure details were accurate. Those qualities had helped him throughout his career. But now, he was facing a lesson that every person with authority eventually encounters. Experience can help someone make decisions, but experience can also create confidence that must always be balanced with humility. Michael was beginning to understand that the person in front of him could not be measured by a brief interaction. Marcus was not defined by a folder, a conversation, or a single moment in time. He was defined by decades of choices that had shaped his life. Years earlier, Marcus had made a commitment to serve something larger than himself. He had lived by principles that demanded responsibility and dedication. When his military service ended, those principles did not disappear. They continued influencing the way he treated people, handled challenges, and viewed the world around him. He never considered himself someone who deserved special attention. In his mind, service was something to be honored through actions, not something to be used for personal advantage. That was why he remained calm. He knew that explaining every detail about his past would not change who he was. The truth of his life existed whether people recognized it or not. Imagine carrying a story that could completely change someone's opinion of you, yet choosing not to reveal it immediately. Imagine knowing you have earned respect but still choosing to show respect first. That was the difference between seeking recognition and having true confidence. Marcus did not need a title to tell him who he was. He did not need applause to validate the years he had given. As people around them continued watching, they began noticing something important. Marcus was not acting like someone who feared the truth. He was acting like someone who trusted it. Michael started seeing details he had overlooked before. The calm responses, the respectful attitude, the quiet strength that came from someone who had nothing to prove. The situation was becoming less about a question of identity and more about understanding the person behind it. What Michael did not know yet was that Marcus's history contained moments of service and dedication that extended far beyond this building. His name was connected to a legacy that had been recorded, remembered, and respected by people who understood the impact of his work. The truth was getting closer, and when it finally arrived, it would change the way everyone viewed the quiet veteran standing before them. The questions surrounding Marcus Carter continued, but the answers were not found in his words. They were hidden in the history he carried with him. While others focused on the uncertainty of the moment, Marcus remained the same person he had always been. Calm, respectful, patient. He understood that people often made decisions based on what they could see, but he also knew that the most important parts of a person's story were often invisible. Officer Michael Reynolds looked again at the information in front of him, realizing that something about the situation did not match his first impression. Marcus did not speak like someone trying to create an excuse. He spoke like someone who had spent a lifetime understanding responsibility. There was a difference between defending yourself and simply allowing the truth to exist. Marcus chose the second path. Years before this moment, Marcus had built a reputation through dedication and service. His military career was not defined by one event or one award. It was built through thousands of decisions made over time. Early mornings, difficult responsibilities, moments when doing the right thing mattered more than receiving recognition. After leaving the military, Marcus could have chosen to constantly remind people of his past, but he never did. He believed that real service was not something to display whenever convenient. It was something that became part of who you were. That belief shaped every part of his life. As the information surrounding Marcus began to receive more attention, small details started connecting together. The name, the records, and the history behind them created a picture that was very different from the assumptions made earlier. People began realizing that they had been looking at only one page of a much longer story. Michael experienced that realization in a personal way. He had always believed that asking questions was part of protecting people and maintaining order. But he was learning that the way questions were asked mattered just as much as the questions themselves. Respect and responsibility had to exist together. A position of authority did not remove the need for understanding. Imagine meeting someone and judging their entire life based on a few minutes. Imagine never knowing the years of effort, sacrifice, and dedication that shaped the person standing in front of you. That was the lesson Marcus represented. Every person carries chapters that strangers may never see. Every person has experiences that cannot be measured by appearance alone. As more people learned about Marcus, they discovered that his story was not about proving someone wrong. It was about revealing something that had always been true. His value existed before anyone recognized it. His service mattered before anyone mentioned his name. His character was present before anyone knew his achievements. The moment became larger than a simple misunderstanding. It became a reminder that truth often arrives quietly. It does not always enter with attention or announcement. Sometimes it appears through records, through memories, and through the people who know the full story. Michael was beginning to understand that the man standing before him was not someone who needed to be defined by a single conversation. Marcus Carter was a person shaped by years of commitment, and the world was about to discover just how meaningful that commitment had been. The truth about Marcus Carter was no longer just a question of identity. It was becoming a story about everything people often fail to notice when they only look at the surface. As the details of his background began to emerge, the atmosphere around him started to change. The same man who had quietly stood there moments earlier was now being viewed through a completely different lens. But Marcus himself remained unchanged. He did not suddenly become more confident because people finally understood him. He did not need approval from anyone in that room. His confidence had been built years before, through experiences that shaped his character long before this moment arrived. Officer Michael Reynolds continued processing everything he was learning. He had entered the situation believing he understood what he was seeing. Now, he was discovering that understanding a person required more than observation. It required patience. It required listening. It required the willingness to accept that the first impression might not be the complete story. Marcus had spent his entire life surrounded by moments where responsibility mattered more than recognition. During his military service, He learned that true leadership was not about being noticed. It was about being dependable when others needed you most. Those lessons stayed with him after retirement. He carried them into everyday life, including this unexpected encounter. He never believed that his past gave him permission to demand special treatment. Instead, he believed his past gave him a greater responsibility to treat others with respect. That mindset was what made the situation so meaningful. Marcus was not trying to win an argument. He was not trying to embarrass anyone. He simply wanted the truth to be understood. As more information became available, people began seeing the difference between appearance and reality. The quiet man who seemed unknown was connected to years of dedication and service. The person who appeared ordinary had spent a lifetime doing extraordinary things without needing constant attention. Imagine having a story that could immediately change how people see you, yet choosing patience instead of using that story as a weapon. Imagine knowing that recognition will eventually come, but refusing to chase it because you understand your own worth. That was the strength Marcus carried. Meanwhile, Michael faced a different kind of challenge. It was not about following a procedure or checking information. It was about reflection. Every person in a position of authority eventually faces moments when they must consider not only what they are allowed to do, but how their choices affect others. Michael was beginning to understand that responsibility included the ability to learn from every interaction. The situation was becoming a reminder that people are often carrying histories that remain invisible until the right moment reveals them. Marcus's story was never about needing anyone to create his value. His value had existed all along. The only thing changing was that more people were finally seeing it. And somewhere beyond that building, a much larger recognition was beginning to move closer. A recognition that would prove Marcus Carter's name was connected to something far greater than anyone in that room could have imagined. The moment everyone had been waiting for began with something simple, a name appearing on a record. But that name carried a history that few people in the room could have imagined. Marcus Carter had never walked into the building expecting recognition. He had not come looking for attention, and he had not planned for anyone to discover the details of his past. Yet sometimes the truth finds its way forward, even when the person carrying it remains silent. As the information surrounding Marcus was reviewed more carefully, the picture became clearer. The quiet veteran standing before them was not someone trying to create confusion. He was someone whose life had been defined by commitment and service. Officer Michael Reynolds watched as the situation changed from a simple question into something much larger. He began to understand that the person he had first encountered represented far more than a single interaction. Marcus represented years of dedication that existed long before anyone in that room knew his name. The records revealed a history of service that stretched across decades. They showed a man who had spent important years of his life accepting responsibility and putting something greater than himself first. But what stood out most was not only what Marcus had done. It was how he carried himself afterward. Many people achieve something meaningful and spend their lives reminding others about it. Marcus chose a different path. He believed that the value of service came from the service itself, not from constant recognition. That belief was why he remained calm when others questioned him. He knew the truth did not become more valuable when people discovered it. It had always been valuable. Imagine spending years building a legacy that nobody around you knows about. Imagine having every reason to explain yourself but choosing patience because your actions have already spoken for you. That was the quiet confidence Marcus carried. As the details continued to spread, the people around him began seeing the situation differently. They noticed that Marcus was not searching for approval. He was simply allowing the truth to be known. Michael found himself reflecting on the way he approached the encounter. He had always believed that responsibility meant making careful decisions. Now he was learning that careful decisions required more than information. They required perspective. They required understanding the person behind the situation. The lesson was becoming clear. Authority is not measured only by the ability to make decisions. It is also measured by the ability to recognize when there is more to learn. Marcus had never needed a powerful introduction to prove his worth. His life had already created that proof through years of dedication. The discovery of his background did not transform him into someone important. It revealed that he had been important all along. Then came the moment that changed the atmosphere completely. A message arrived from an unexpected place. It was not a request from Marcus. It was not something he had asked anyone to arrange. It was recognition coming from people who already understood the significance of his service. The name that had once been questioned was now being requested by name. And suddenly, everyone realized this was not just about one misunderstanding. It was about a story that had been hidden in plain sight. The message that arrived changed the way everyone viewed Marcus Carter's story. For a moment, the room became quiet as people realized that the situation was much bigger than they first believed. The name that had been questioned only moments earlier was now connected to a level of recognition that reached far beyond the building. But Marcus remained exactly the same person he had always been. He did not celebrate the attention. He did not use the moment to prove that he was right. Instead, he simply listened and allowed the truth to speak for itself. That reaction surprised many people. They expected someone in Marcus's position to show frustration or disappointment after being misunderstood. Instead, they saw something different. They saw patience. They saw discipline. They saw a person who understood that dignity was not something given by others. It was something carried within. Officer Michael Reynolds watched Marcus carefully, and for the first time he began to see the complete picture. The man in front of him was not defined by a question, a document, or a brief interaction. He was defined by decades of choices that showed commitment and responsibility. Michael realized that his first impression had been based on only a small piece of information. He had seen the moment, but he had not seen the journey behind it. That realization stayed with him. Everyone has moments when they believe they understand a situation, only to discover that there is a deeper story waiting to be uncovered. Marcus's experience became a powerful example of that truth. His life represented years of dedication that did not disappear simply because strangers did not know about it. Imagine carrying a lifetime of achievements while remaining humble enough to let others discover them naturally. Imagine having the ability to immediately explain your importance but choosing instead to remain respectful because you know your character does not depend on recognition. That was Marcus's approach. He never believed his service made him better than anyone else. He believed it gave him an even greater responsibility to treat people with fairness and respect. As the news of the recognition continued to spread, more people began asking questions about Marcus's journey. They wanted to understand how someone with such a meaningful history could walk through everyday life without seeking attention. The answer was simple. Marcus had never served for applause. He had served because he believed in responsibility. Michael began reflecting on what leadership truly meant. He understood that having authority was not only about enforcing rules or making decisions. It was also about having the humility to learn when new information changed the situation. The experience with Marcus became a lesson he would remember for the rest of his career. It reminded him that every person has a story that cannot be discovered through assumptions alone. The most important details are often the ones hidden beneath the surface. Marcus Carter had never needed a moment like this to know his own value. But for everyone watching, this moment revealed something unforgettable. True honor does not appear when people finally notice it. True honor exists long before anyone looks closely enough to see it. The recognition that reached Marcus Carter was never something he had chased. In fact, the attention felt almost unfamiliar to a man who had spent most of his life believing that service was about responsibility, not recognition. While others focused on the surprising turn of events, Marcus remained focused on the values that had guided him for decades. He understood that a person's true character was not revealed when everything went perfectly. It was revealed during moments when patience, honesty, and self-control were tested. Officer Michael Reynolds continued thinking about everything that had happened. The experience had changed the way he viewed his role and the people he encountered every day. He realized that every person walking through a public place carried a story that might never be visible at first glance. Some stories were written through years of sacrifice. Some were built through quiet decisions that nobody noticed. Some belonged to people who never expected anyone to remember their names. Marcus's story belonged to that last group. He had never built his identity around titles or public attention. His identity came from the choices he made when nobody was watching. The years he spent serving his country were not important to him because they created a reputation. They were important because they represented a promise he had chosen to keep. That promise continued long after his military career ended. It shaped the way he treated people, handled challenges, and carried himself through uncertain situations. As Michael reflected on the encounter, he understood something that extended beyond Marcus's individual story. Respect should not begin after someone's achievements are discovered. Respect should exist before the discovery. A person should not have to reveal a history of service, success, or accomplishment before being treated with dignity. That lesson stayed with Michael because it applied to every interaction, not just this one. Imagine how different the world would feel if people looked deeper before forming conclusions. Imagine how many stories would remain hidden if nobody took the time to listen. Marcus showed that strength did not always appear through loud words or dramatic actions. Sometimes strength appeared through calmness. Sometimes it appeared through choosing understanding instead of frustration. Sometimes it appeared through allowing the truth to arrive in its own time. The experience also changed the people around them. Those who witnessed the moment saw a reminder that appearances could never tell the entire story. They saw that a person who seemed ordinary could carry extraordinary experiences. They saw that humility could exist alongside achievement. Most importantly, they saw that recognition does not create value. It only reveals value that was already there. For Michael, the lesson was personal. He did not walk away feeling defeated. He walked away with a greater understanding of responsibility. He learned that authority requires more than confidence. It requires awareness, fairness, and the willingness to learn. Marcus, meanwhile, continued forward with the same quiet dignity he had always carried. The attention would eventually fade, but the lesson would remain. His story was never only about one encounter. It was about a simple truth that many people forget. Every person has a history, every person deserves respect, and sometimes the most remarkable stories belong to those who never ask anyone to notice. The story of Marcus Carter did not end with the moment when people finally discovered the truth. In many ways, that was only the beginning of a greater understanding. The attention surrounding his name eventually faded, but the lesson behind his experience remained with everyone who heard it. Marcus returned to the same values that had guided him throughout his entire life. He never believed that one moment of recognition could define him, because he knew his character had been built through thousands of moments long before anyone was watching. His years of service, his dedication, and his commitment to doing what was right had always existed, whether people recognized them or not. For Marcus, the greatest reward was never public attention. It was knowing that he had remained faithful to the principles he believed in. Officer Michael Reynolds also carried the memory of that day with him. The experience changed the way he approached every person he encountered afterward. He learned that a position of authority came with a responsibility to look beyond appearances and understand the full picture. He realized that every person could be carrying a story filled with experiences, challenges, and achievements that might never be visible at first glance. The lesson was not about one person being right and another person being wrong. It was about growth, awareness, and the importance of being willing to see beyond assumptions. Marcus never wanted the world to remember him because of a misunderstanding. He wanted people to remember the principle behind the moment. A person's value should not depend on how quickly others recognize it. Respect should not appear only after someone's background becomes impressive. Respect should exist because every individual has a story worth hearing. Imagine walking through life knowing that your greatest achievements may remain unknown to most people, yet choosing kindness and humility anyway. Imagine having the ability to reveal everything about yourself but choosing patience because you understand that true worth does not need constant explanation. That was the quiet strength Marcus represented. His story became a reminder that heroes are not always the people standing in the spotlight. Sometimes they are the people who continue doing the right thing without expecting anyone to notice. The experience between Marcus and Michael became larger than a single encounter. It became a reflection of how people see one another and how easily important details can be missed when judgment comes too quickly. It reminded communities that behind every face is a history, behind every name is a journey, and behind every person is a story that deserves fairness. Marcus Carter walked into that building as a man many people did not understand. He left as a reminder of something much deeper. Honor does not begin when others acknowledge it. Honor exists from the moment someone chooses to live with integrity. The world did not create Marcus's legacy that day. It simply discovered what had been there all along. And the final lesson remained clear. Sometimes the people we know the least may be the ones who have given the most, and sometimes the quietest voices carry the strongest stories.